Story 1. She turned on Enya, then started crying after we finished and told me I was her first since her boyfriend died a week ago. It was before Uber, so I walked 5 miles home in snow that night. Story 2. She was on top and riding on me. She reached into her night table to get something to spice things up. I expected a vibrator or something similar. She pulled out a really big safety pin, and before I could even ask, she was piercing her own nipple with it. Story 3. I told him I was having my period, and he said he didn't care. I gave him oral sex and was getting up to take out my tampon, but he took off my underwear and pulled out my tampon. It happened so fast, I didn't even realize what was happening. He said he had to pee anyway, so he'd just throw it out. Kind of freaked me out that he did it so smoothly, like no fumbling for the string. Story 4. I was 19 at the time, working as a security guard at a mall in New York. I had been flirting hard with this gorgeous girl who had just started working at Hollister. One night, she asked me to give her a ride home after closing because her car was having issues and her ride bailed on her. We got to her place, and she asked me if I wanted to come up and smoke a little, which I was down for. Things progressed pretty quickly once we got upstairs, and before I knew it, clothes were coming off. She was just absolutely stunning, and I was basically drooling at this point. Everything was going super well, and indications were good that this was going to be more than a one-time thing. We were about 40 minutes in, and she was ready to go all in. She wanted to start from behind. I spread those cheeks to get that view we all love before taking the plunge, and what do I see? Just to the side of her rear was a pebble-sized chunk of excrement. I made a split-second decision that, well, things happened, so I was going to try and swipe it off and keep going. I made a move like I was slowly massaging both of her cheeks and slid both of my thumbs, one on either side, slowly up the crack. Success along the way, I got that little nuisance. But this is the moment where I messed up. I hesitated because I didn't know where I was going to wipe it after I got it off her. In that moment of hesitation, she glanced over her left shoulder, saw the chunk on my thumb, and was shocked. I'm going to be 40 next year, and in all the years since, I have never heard a sound quite like the one that came out of her in that moment. It was like a screaming banshee. She jumped off the bed and ran out of the room sobbing. I followed, and she locked herself in the bathroom. I spent the next few minutes trying to talk to her through the door, with her screaming at me to just leave and crying. So I left. I tried to message her throughout the morning the next day, but she wouldn't answer me. I decided I'd try to have a word with her when I saw her at work. But when I got to the store, they told me she quit that morning. I never heard from her again. Edit. My most upvoted comment ever, and it's something like this. Glad I was able to brighten so many people's day with my remembered misery. Story 5. Met her at a metal alternative club on my birthday. We got back to my place and the electricity was off, which was fine as I lit a few candles, and it set a great mood. The next morning, I was awoken by 10 of my friends as they had arrived at my place to abduct me for some day drinking at a brewery. She had to walk out of the bedroom to 10 guys side-eyeing each other. What made it worse was that she couldn't find her glasses, which meant she couldn't get dressed either. So she had to walk out in my duvet and ask for help. The final straw was that because I was going to be drinking, I couldn't drive, so I had to ask one of my friends to give her a ride to her place, and she ended up sitting in the back and me in front. There is no configuration in the car where it isn't awkward. She ended up giving me her email address, which she never used, and I didn't question it for a second. A few months later, it occurred to me that she had handled that whole situation gracefully, and I'd had a lot of fun, so I managed to track her down. Been married 16 years now, and she still handles all of my idiocy with grace. Longest one-night stand of my life. Story 6. I hooked up with a single mom once, and when I woke up in the morning, she had gone to get her child and refused to leave. So, I was basically hungover, sitting there with a little child running around my house, and this woman just sitting on the couch watching television, repeatedly complaining, "But I have nowhere to go." I finally got her out eventually. I hated that. Poor kid. Story 7. This was the first one-night stand I had ever had, and I had no clue what I was doing. None at all. When I showed up, I suggested turning on a movie. I figured we'd cozy up during the film, and hands would start going places, etc. You know how it goes. But I am a huge nerd, a computer nerd especially, and her laptop was riddled with viruses. I had never seen such a messed up personal computer in my entire life. She also had no movies, and this was actually before streaming services. At this point, Netflix was DVD by mail only. So I figured no big deal, I'll just download BitTorrent and find a movie real quick. But I couldn't even get that far due to the state of her personal computer. She had animated ads and so on running on her desktop. If it was a human, I would have pulled the plug. So instead of being able to find a movie or just saying forget it, let's just get naked, my inner nerd started to fix it. And she fell asleep while I fixed up her personal computer. Then, first thing in the morning, we finally did the deed, only for me to finish in about 1.7 seconds. This is the first time I've ever told this story in any capacity. Probably the dumbest thing I've ever done. Story 8. Definitely when his mom walked in on me having intercourse with him. She had a key to his place and decided to let herself in. She was so quiet, I never heard her enter his apartment or walk down the hall to his room. She was horrified and, rather than go home, decided to wait in the living room for us to finish so she could talk to us about it. I asked him if he felt okay discussing it on his own with her for safety reasons, and he insisted it was fine. She tried demanding I stay, and I was like, nope, not happening. So I left. Story 9. This guy had a silk-fitted sheet, and it kept slipping off the corners of the bed. He would pause and try to fix them while still with me. Then he made absolutely no sound at all, didn't even tense up to indicate he was finished, and rolled off me. I thought we were switching positions, but he took off the condom and went to clean up. I was sitting there wondering what had just happened. Story 10. Ran into his mom at the store while we were buying alcohol and condoms. It got really awkward when she asked him how long we had been dating. And he said, I met her in a bar tonight. Story 11. Met a girl at the bar, and within 15 minutes or so she asked if I wanted to go to my place. I was quite surprised but went along with it. We got back to my place and she asked to use the bathroom. She came back, completely changed her mind, and said sorry, but she had to go. I said okay and received no explanation. The next day, I was thinking about it and realized most likely why. I was letting one of my friends live with me temporarily, and she was using that bathroom as hers since I had a private one in the back, so it would have been full of women's bathroom stuff. I guarantee she thought I was up to no good. She was not there that night. Story 12. Had an amazing night with a really beautiful man who was visiting from out of town. He said he was staying with his aunt and cousins. We destroyed her bed. Destroyed it. The next morning, I'm doing the walk of shame down the driveway as the aunt walks up. His aunt is my 5th grade teacher. Later, she was my son's high school principal. I skipped the parent-teacher association those 4 years. Story 13, he came right after putting it in. I'm not against performance. I've had sex many times where the guy orgasmed quickly, and it doesn't bother me much, but this time made me feel uncomfortable. He put on the condom, inserted it, and I thought his expression was kind of strange. He pulled out, and I asked, "Are you okay?" He didn't respond. The condom was left inside me, full of his fluids. He didn't even remove it, he made me do it. I also want to add that there was no foreplay beforehand, so I received nothing from this interaction. I told him I just wanted to go home after that, and I never spoke to him again. Story 14. I connected with one of my coworkers at a restaurant once. I lost the condom inside her. Even as drunk as I was, I could feel the condom inside her. So I stopped and told her we needed to stop to find it. She, understandably, got mad at me, thinking I was lying about using a condom in the first place. She was small, had short fingers, and couldn't reach it. I had to plead with her to trust that I was wearing one and that it came off, and that it staying in there was unhealthy, and that I could get it out. After some back and forth, she finally allowed me to reach inside her with my fingers and search until I found and removed it. The relief was bittersweet for both of us. Working with her was quite funny after that. The sexual tension never went away, but we never acted on it again after that. B, if you're out there, I hope the best for you. Story 15. Super religious guy, when I walked into his apartment, There were crosses and pictures of saints everywhere. No big deal. I'm not against it. But before he went down on me, he did the sign of the cross with his fingers and said, "Amen" afterward. Thought it was a joke, and I asked him about it when we finished. Nope, he was 100% serious. Story 16. Absolutely wasted. Bars closed. Stumbled home with some guy. Started doing it, stopped after some time because the guy's dog jumped onto the bed and started licking itself incessantly. And then us. The weird part was that he didn't think this was a problem and said we should just ignore it if it started licking us. As if this was what happened when he had sex with people. I insisted we stop and turn the light on to get the dog out, and it turned out I'd gotten my period, which was not expected at all, and the entire white bed was covered in blood. I mean, massacre level. Shocking. The dog was licking the blood. He wanted to put everything in trash bags immediately, understandably. So I helped him do that while apologizing profusely. He silently went to the shower and I bolted. I texted him the next day and asked for his mailing address so I could send new bedding, and he never responded. Never saw or heard from him ever again, which was just fine with me. Story 17. Had a woman show up at my house with a bottle of vodka. I still don't know how she knew my address, but whatever. We got drunk and started going at it. She vomited on my sheets, then started crying about how she was a horrible mother. I didn't know she had a child. I put her in the shower and stripped my bed. I went to check on her, and she was doing some self-service work with the shower head while still crying about being a horrible mother. I just went back to bed. She came crawling into bed saying we should finish and that she had her tubes tied, so I didn't have to worry about anything. I told her I had to get up early for work, but she was welcome to stay. She told me she was going to find someone else. That was quite a night. Story 18. Met a girl in a bar in Kingwood, Texas. I lived in Humble, which is right next to it. We had a few drinks and decided to go back to my place. She kept telling me how good she was, and of course I indicated that I needed proof. She was doing really well until she gagged and threw up about 10 lemon drop shots on me. I showered with her, still somewhat intoxicated. We dated for about a year. Story 19. I thought she kept calling me Joey during the deed. My name is not Joey. I stopped and asked her, "Are you calling me Joey?" She said, "No, I said choke me." Story 20. So I had a pretty bad shoulder dislocation back in high school. I played first base for our baseball team, and a runner ran into my arm when I was fully stretched trying to catch a throw on a slow roller down the third baseline. It healed up okay, but my arm would occasionally pop out, and I would have to pop it back in, kind of like Mel Gibson in Lethal Weapon 2. Anyway, in sophomore year in college, I was with a young lady I met at a party. We were in her extremely unstable bed, and I was on top, arms locked out in a push-up position to try to stabilize myself. The bed ended up moving a bit more than I expected, and of course, my left shoulder decided to pop out of the socket while she was raising her head up. I fell forward, and my collarbone drove directly into the bridge of her nose. Blood went everywhere. We ended up at the school infirmary, and they took her back to set her nose. I was in the waiting area, and a nurse came out with 2 campus police officers. They proceeded to ask me what happened, and my brain slowly realized that they thought I must have punched her. I was mortified and started telling them what happened in a completely panicked rush. By the end of the story, the cops were trying their best to hold in laughter. I didn't get arrested, but for some reason, I never saw that young lady again. Story 21. A girl I met at a bar once farted loudly at the point of orgasm. I thought this was hilarious and spent at least 15 minutes calming her down and trying to lessen her embarrassment. It is still one of the funniest experiences of my life. She was cool about it afterward, thankfully, and I didn't tell anyone until years later. Story 22. I was super drunk at a bar in the city that my friend took me to. We lived in the suburbs. My friend literally met a hot Swedish flight attendant. It was the early 1980s, and they were still called stewardesses then. She wanted to take him back to her hotel room. He said, "Thanks, but I can't. I've got to be sure my friend gets home okay. He was a good person." She said, "Oh, that's okay. There's another bed in the room. He can just crash there." So I fell asleep chuckling with my head under the covers while Bert was with the nice Swedish lady. You didn't say it had to be my one-night stand. Story 23. She screamed bloody murder when she came. It was so loud that I was surprised the neighbors didn't call the police. We had to stop for a few minutes and talk just to confirm things didn't go non-consensual without me realizing. Story 24. I connected with a girl in college at a party. We found a big closet with no lights and just went to town on each other. About 30 minutes later, we both finished and were lying on the ground sweaty and wet. Someone opened the closet, and the lights flooded in. I swear it looked like a murder scene. She had started her period while we were together, and there were bloody handprints everywhere. The walls, the clothes, the floor. Both of us were covered in blood. Needless to say, she ran out screaming, and I fell out of the closet laughing. Oh, and yes, I was kicked out of the party.